So this is the second week, huh? Second episode.
Second. It's been a while.
It has, yeah. It was a learning curve to get it all edited and.
Well, you were just starting school. You had to prep for the SAT.
Yeah.
You have another one next week.
I do, yeah.
That's like your fourth one?
Fifth. Yeah.
Fifth one, right.
We're going to make it work, though. So.
Right, yeah.
And we have the camera positions changed just slightly, so we have more direct.
Cool.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
So we're going to make it work. But today, I figured we'd do a little different format than usual. We're in the last episode. Oh. What? Good?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm like, different format.
Oh, okay.
What's going on, man?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so in the last episode, we kind of just, talked about, various topics we're interested in and kind of just, gave our thoughts on whatever.
We went freestyle.
Yeah, freestyle. And so
Yeah.
I'm thinking I got a couple questions prepared, and it's going to be, kind of
So it's like interview your dad.
Kind of interviewing my dad, yeah.
I mean, this is actually kind of I think it's a neat idea for other parents to do with their teenage son or daughter, right? Maybe they can watch the video, right? And get it, interrogated by their kid on film. And we dare them to
funny.
publish it on social media, especially LinkedIn, a professional network,
Yeah.
So
well, I got some good questions.
Are you aiming to torpedo my career?
No, not
All right,
quite.
good.
But
Awesome.
I have hopefully some thought-provoking questions that I've thought of myself.
I'll do my best.
And
I'll do my best,
I guess
man.
I'll just start with
love.
the first question.
All right. You just want to dive into questions?
Do you want it? Or do you want to give an update? It has been a little bit since we last recorded, about a month and a half.
Wow. Right.
So,
It's been that long, huh?
yeah, I've been, like I said, a learning curve with the editing.
Well, you're like,
school, everything.
you just you have I don't know, 7 AP classes, and you're writing a book, you're finishing your book.
Like that. Yeah.
I know you don't want to talk about it. You're all modest and everything.
All right.
But you're busy, so it's good. And I'm busy as well. So here we are, 6 weeks later.
Yeah. But we're here.
Yeah.
We're here, and we're on the second episode.
And we're on the spot.
And we're on
as a father and son.
Okay.
And the world's going to see.
Some of these are fun. Some of these are a little more serious.
Oh, I'm so nervous.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Okay.
I don't know what to expect.
Okay, and so this...
I have not seen the questions ahead of time.
I think you'll appreciate this first question.
Okay.
Question 1. The difference between confidence and arrogance is believing you will win compared to believing you cannot fail. Agree or disagree?
So I can agree with it, and I can disagree with it. So it depends on the situation, right?
Okay.
So I think hindsight being 2020, oftentimes someone who is approaching something with confidence, they have a humbling moment, and maybe they experience a learning moment, right? So they have some failure, and then they may attribute that to being arrogant. They may actually, by definition, view that as the definition of arrogance, going into something and failing. And they were on top of the world, and then they were at the bottom of the mountain.
Right.
In that moment, right? So they went from being confident,
right, yeah,
to feeling like a failure and looking back at their former self saying, you are arrogant. Right?
Right.
So that's one possibility. I mean, there's so many ways to unpack this.
Exactly. So attack it however you want.
So can you repeat the question?
Okay. The difference between confidence and arrogance is believing you will win compared to believing you can't fail. Arrogance being believing that you cannot fail.
Okay. So I would also say that it's possible that the person that's approaching it with confidence may be prepared, and the person that's approaching it with arrogance is approaching it without preparation, and they're just believing in their themselves that they, without preparation they can do it. Oh, I got this. Right. I got this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go at it. I don't need to study. I don't need to practice.
Right.
Right. Maybe that's someone's definition of arrogance,
Right.
right?
Okay.
So, I mean, there's a few ways to approach this, and there's probably something that I haven't thought of.
Sure.
Certainly
I
is
would.
something I haven't thought of. There's
Of
always
course,
something I
you don't
haven't
know
thought
what you
of.
don't know. Is something
Correct.
you say.
I do not know what I don't know.
You tell me that quite often. But,
I do.
Yeah. So I guess to give kind of my input on this is I think it's a correct statement when you apply it in general. Obviously there are many cases where that may not be the case, especially when you're considering what confidence or arrogance will mean to somebody in reference to what it means to me, for example. So if we're to say that arrogance means that you're proceeding in your life assuming that it is an impossibility to fail, that no matter what you do, no matter how bad you mess up, eventually you will win. If we were to say that is being arrogant, then that's fundamentally disregarding the fact that someone might not feel that way. Someone might think that arrogance is instead a branch of confidence, but one with more extreme. So someone who's overconfident.
Sure, and I think there's a little dash of attitude in there as well.
Sure, someone who's, not really proceeding with their life in the most calm way or in the most affectionate way. Someone who could perhaps be narcissistic,
Someone
like
with
that.
a low emotional IQ.
Sure.
Could be proceeding in a way that's like a bull in a china closet.
Right. And they may not even
treating
know.
the people around them like they're, not
Yeah.
part of the experience or important to the experience.
Yeah. And they might not even know. They might not even be aware that they're being perceived as arrogant or confident. They might have not even thought of it, right? They might just be going about their life, doing what they do, operating in the way that they know. And, whether or not you want to say that contributes to being arrogant or confident is sort of a different question. Maybe the fact that someone doesn't even care enough to ask, or am I being perceived as arrogant or confident? Maybe that moves you towards one side of the spectrum or another. That's, a completely different question. And it can go so deep with
I mean, we can unpack that right there. So it can be taken from the perspective of how a person interprets themselves in their own experience. And then there's from the perspective of others that are interpreting that individual's attitudes and behaviors, right, as being, that's a confident person, that's an arrogant person. Now, I would argue that the person that is proceeding with confidence, that is treating those around them with empathy and a high emotional or high awareness of others, actually including them in the process, for example.
Right.
Would be showing attributes of leadership. Whereas the person that is proceeding with arrogance is unattractive to others,
Right.
and is not showing leadership qualities.
Yeah.
Right? So they will fail alone.
Right. And that might be a valuable lesson.
Perhaps.
Right?
Yeah.
Which leads me to kind of just put it out there that arrogance does have its place. To be arrogant can certainly be an extremely bad thing and detrimental thing if you're arrogant for your entire life. But being in a state of arrogance can allow you to be humbled, and that humbling can be very beneficial to your future. So in regards to success, we often talk about how failure is one of the best learning tools for success, if not the best. And being an arrogant person, you can have catastrophic failures, which can lead you to operate in a different capacity.
Right, but you still have to love success.
Of course, yeah. Almost.
Or enjoy it.
Yeah.
But not at the expense of others.
Absolutely. And
Though
that,
there are winners and losers.
True.
Right?
There are.
Yes.
Okay, so anything else to add to that?
I think let's go on to the next one.
It's a bit of a repeat. We did discuss it a little bit in the last one.
Yeah.
It's the only one that is.
But got to add a little bit more
somewhat
color to.
Yeah, I know you want to add a little bit more to, because there's so much. I mean, even what we said just now.
Now that
so
we're
much
on
more.
camera and I'm more aware, and I've looked back on some of those recordings in retrospect, like I would change my answer a little bit, or I would add a little bit more to it, or there was more commentary to it if you watch the long form video on YouTube, which we recommend that you do that. It's
Absolutely.
actually a compelling episode. So anyway,
It is pretty good. I like it. Yeah, but and same for me. When I was editing the video and rewatching, I realized I'm not as outspoken as I want to be when we turn on the cameras, and I want to talk more clearly, more loudly. I was a little quiet, so I'm doing my best here.
Yeah, but maybe outspoken isn't the best
sure
descriptive choice of words. It's just you learn as like we're observing ourselves. We're going through this process and we're sharing it with the world, right? And we're learning as we go. So we learned about the equipment, we learned about the software, how to put the production together, and we're still learning that, right? But you're also learning how to carry yourself on camera.
Yeah.
Right. You're starting to become aware of like ahs and buts and like, not being like fluent in speech, even though Elon Musk will vocalize his computational process as he's speaking. He's like, but, and a lot of in between.
Yeah.
But,
you can really see the gears turning. That is one thing I appreciate about Elon Musk, is I feel like he actually thinks about the answers he gives.
Right. But he actually will vocalize. If I was watching him today, and he vocalizes his as he's going through that cognitive process, he's verbalizing it in the way that he speaks, just so in between he has a lot of fillers that is like a representation of his thoughts in a way, because he's going through his process before he shares it verbally, so anyway.
Next question.
This
one's a bit of a fun one. So I'm not exactly sure what your response will be, but it's not business related necessarily. But humanity discovered math. We didn't invent it. Agree or disagree?
So I think that humanity, I think that math is actually embedded in nature, and is through observation. Human beings started to notice and pay attention and tune in to different things that were going on around them in the most basic level. We're talking about like very early humans, like 13,000 years ago. Right. And maybe even before. So, so math is something that is just part of nature, and it exists in the absence of humans.
Right.
I think that we just have started to, so especially when it comes to analog.
Okay.
Right. So like just the analog world, the physical world around us. So like physics, for example, physics 101, throwing a ball up and then it comes down and you catch it, so you can actually model that equation. And you can really get philosophical about that, just that one concept, that the ball at the very top of its arc is basically standing still for a moment before it changes direction and comes down. Right. So that's an observation that can be modeled with math. And so I guess to answer your question is it's I mean, we can talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
We can unpack this a lot, right? But I think that math is something that it's just a system that we've used that we've invented or formulated to organize observation, and then the theoretical that is beyond observation, and then that would prompt us to experiment to create observable experiments that we can test hypotheses.
Right.
That can all be modeled with math.
Yeah.
Right. So that can vary from culture to culture.
Right.
And there are cultures that predate, our current, Anglo-Saxon dominated culture, where we have the Roman system of numbers, like the Mayan culture where they had a series of dots,
Okay.
single dots, double dots, whatever that they used. It was very elegant with their calendar, which was another mathematical model that was, that was conjured up or you know, organized to emulate the systems of stars around us in the earth and what they were observing with the sun and the stars, and over a very long period of time, generations, right? It's a really good example of how math was used by humans to create a way of organizing observation.
Yeah.
That ended up resulting in a mathematical model or system.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so the way I would answer this is I'd approach this from a slightly different but similar perspective relating it to other cultures. I would go as far as to say that a hypothetical alien race on a separate planet would have something like math. The only part that we've invented is coining the terms. So, like pi or irrational numbers, imaginary numbers. Those might not be called the same thing, of course, but the principle still stands because math is the language of the universe, and the way we've coined it is only so that we can consume it and understand it as just that. And so I think the reason why I think it's a fun question is because, my classmates are like, oh, what is this? Why do I need to know this? This is stupid. Who made this? And it's like, well, if you really think about it, math is, in every single case, derived from observations. And the math that is derived from those observations will have subsequent math derived from that math. Everything you see mathematically comes from explanatory variables applied to the real world,
which are based on observation
and analysis.
So their planet is a little bit bigger. It's a little bit further from the sun. It's their days are a little bit longer.
Sure.
Their years are a little bit longer or whatever, right? So just imagine this. This is like, as you're talking, I'm just like, oh my God, the way that we can actually create a way of translating our language and our ability to communicate with them, which would be through math, is to just show me how you actually represent the circle. Right. So you draw a circle and you draw the radius and you get the, 2 pi r or whatever, and it's like, and I think I actually just got that wrong, but it's, what I'm saying, right? So then
2
it's
pi r is circumference.
Yeah. So, but then they would actually be able to do that. You don't speak the same language and you may actually have a different form. Maybe they don't.
It might not be a 2
hands, or they, what I'm saying, but that's how that you could actually start to create a way of translating.
Yeah.
And
like the ratios would be
to
the
form
same.
the basis of communication. I think the way to actually form that basis of communication with an alien species from another universe that's as or more intelligent than we are is to start with math. Start with the circle.
Yeah.
As basic as that.
Because the circle is a very interesting shape.
So
it's perfect.
That is almost a proof that math predates humanity.
Well, absolutely. We I mean, for example, gravity on Earth is negative 9.8 meters per second squared. That's the acceleration due to gravity of an object in free fall. That was not something different before Isaac Newton proved that is the value here on Earth. That wasn't something different, right? The universal gravitation formula is like, you add the masses of the two objects and divide by how far they are apart and multiply it by a constant or whatever. All this stuff was never different at any point in the last 5 billion years.
Right. But if we actually look at the chronology of human history and go back to the earliest periods where things were documented, what was documented first? Math or physics? Right. So it's like it's a chicken and egg scenario that we're talking about. What came first, physics or math?
Okay. Probably.
Right.
Who knows, right?
So it's like we're talking about such a interrelated topics, math and physics, and also chemistry. you know, so it's, you know, astronomy and all the various sciences,
Right.
you know, going off on kind of like a tangent a little bit from the question, but it's like, you know, this interrelatedness of these things that were captured in observation by early humans started to influence and form the basis of math.
Yeah. I really do like how you put it, though, with a means of communication with some sort of alien entity that would not understand a single thing that we say, or that we have, except for,
They don't speak English.
yeah, they don't.
No.
But the only things they would understand are the things that are universal and the things that are ingrained in unmovable attributes of the universe itself. Things like gravity. They would have some sort of gravity.
They would have they would definitely have a.
It wouldn't be called gravity. Almost certainly not.
They would call it something else because they.
But it would represent the same.
But
thing.
if they may actually come to us already speaking English. Because they may have already, because we're dumb enough to send out signals. You know, we've already sent out signals with radio waves, you know, to communicate, to say, hey, we're here, you know. So really, so they may come to us already speaking English based on the information that we've already given them. And I wonder, in that signal that we shared, did we share the circle? Did we share like some basic concepts so that they could start to understand us, perhaps to our own detriment, but.
Well, I think we wanted to give them a sign of intelligence. And so the thought process is probably similar to what we're talking about, where we wanted to give them a piece of digestible information that they could actually understand as not just random. So things like the circle or the relationship between gravity's pull and any given mass.
Right.
Stuff like that.
It's interesting how geometry serves as such a consistent signal throughout human history. Like I've been watching this Ancient Apocalypse on Netflix, and how the circle is just kind of like, you know, like these massive circles that are like an entire acre. It's perfect square with a circle that is tangential to the square. It's like in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, and they've been clearing land for years to make way for you know, make land available for cattle, to support, you know, the North American population's appetite for beef, which is a whole nother conversation. But just the fact that there's a circle there, they're communicating to us through time. And then these geometric shapes, just basic geometric shapes, present themselves across, you know, geographically dispersed cultures. Yeah. On different continents at different times, and it's just like the circle ends up being sort of this, you know, this one concept that I think is actually
it is. It's a mathematical. Not even a mathematical, but it's more like an anomaly where, it's something that humans or even intelligent minds can conclude. With absolute certainty that this is this, that being a circle, and it's almost unique in that way. Many shapes are like that, but it's not like almost anything else where, you know, like if I say the color of this paper is white, someone who's colorblind may not agree, right? But
they can see contrast.
Sure, but you know, if I say, oh, this shade of black is E90023, and I know that, they might be like, well, that looks like the other hashtag random numbers, whatever, right? My point is that math is not something that has an opinion or can be taken in a different way, especially when you get to the more fundamental math like the circle and attributes of the circle.
Sure. So using something that's analogous to explain like music theory, for example, right? So like music theory is, there's foundations of music theory, which are you know, understanding the musical alphabet and how you form chords and how you express modes and what combination of chords are pleasing to the ear, and all of that stuff is all, it's just it's a system that has been organized, and to represent and explain that the music that we experience, and how you can recreate it, and how other musicians can actually go and play cover songs of different bands, and then there's that which is the, let's say, the known knowns. And then outside of those foundations of music theory, which is like foundations of mathematics, you've got your algebra, you've got your geometry, your trigonometry, your calc 1, 2, 3, linear algebra, advanced engineering math, and then you get into your advanced concepts, which you would get at a master's level, which is where I stopped, and then you would have PhD level stuff where you start to get into the theoretical. So foundations of music theory, even though they call it music theory, I'm playing the guitar, I'm learning music theory. It's really the foundations of music theory, all the scales, arpeggios that fall within a certain key, the modes and all that stuff, is a way of organizing the system of learning so that you can get to the fringe where you're actually starting to go beyond the bounds. You're on the edge of of that foundational knowledge, and now it's time for you to go out and discover and to venture into the theoretical. Right. So math that you learn in school represents the foundational elements, and then once you've consumed all of that, right, you've consumed all of that, and you're a PhD in mathematics, and you're this data scientist at Google, and you're making like $750,000 a year, and you're like, yes, they probably make more than that actually, but it's right. Like now you're starting to get into, you have access to the vast amount of computational power, and you're actually able to see your math in action, which is got to be exciting, right? And you're actually able to invent stuff that is beyond the foundational elements. It's stretching the theoretical. You're starting to imagine the possible, and then conduct experiments to really test those theories, those hypotheses, right? So, and the very most basic level is the circle. Yeah. Or even in music theory, there's the circle of fifths, which is a way of organizing the center of it all, of the foundation, is the circle of fifths, and it's all comes back down to the circle, which is the unit that will enable us to translate our culture, our language, our math to an alien species that has never been exposed to our stuff before. That's the starting point.
Right.
So to answer your question, math predates humanity.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yes.
100%.
100%.
I am
100%.
I resolve
and
that
there
in my
there are
mind.
people who don't agree with that. People I personally know, usually not anyone who's like a mathematician or anything. No,
Gotcha.
no one's
I
gonna
gotcha.
dispute
Yeah,
that.
we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, but
Right.
okay. Third question.
Okay.
I hope these are good questions so far.
Right.
But discipline is the single greatest principle the human race needs in order to successfully progress further. Agree or disagree?
I agree to a degree.
Okay.
I sound like Muhammad Ali.
All right. Oh.
Right?
Break it down.
Yeah. So I think it's discipline is essential for success, and like focus and commitment and all of these things kind of come together. Very much interrelated, but there's some relative aspects to this. When you look at the general population of people, there's a certain amount of randomness to it, mm-hmm. with pockets of organization. And there's individuals that are maniacally focused on their mission, and they're organized, they're disciplined, and they're driving towards their goals, right?
Right.
It's just like if everybody had a superpower, nobody would have superpowers. So if everybody had discipline, right? So I actually think discipline is a differentiator.
Okay.
To that point, right? Can you repeat the question again?
Discipline is the single greatest principle the human race needs in order to successfully progress further.
Right. So discipline without goals, without vision, right, is what are you working towards?
Right.
What is your discipline towards? So I would disagree with the statement, though. I really feel strongly discipline's extremely important. It's a essential ingredient to success.
Right.
Right. But you have to have that, that vision and that goal that you're working towards, and your so like, your discipline on a daily basis working towards that goal is like, you have to have something you're driving towards, right? Yeah. So is the goal more important than the discipline, or is the discipline more important than the goal?
Okay.
Right. What motivates the discipline? What motivates the effort? Right.
Sure.
It's that vision that you're working towards.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would disagree with the statement. The more I think about it and I unpack it, I wouldn't say it's the single most important thing, because I think what drives the discipline and the effort is actually the dream.
Okay.
So I think the dream is the most important thing, because that's what motivates humans.
Right. Without the dream, there's no discipline. No meaningful discipline.
It's just mindless. It's like being stuck in a job,
right,
where you do the same thing every day, and there's no greater thing you're working towards.
Right.
Right. Like humans occupying Mars or whatever. Right. You have to have that thing you're working towards to make it exciting. So, but at the same time, it depends on your station in life, and it depends on your where you're at in the context of it, right? So if you're in the military, you're in infantry, your discipline is, I would say that statement's probably absolute.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But because you're not dictating the goal.
Yeah.
You're executing somebody else's plan. But within the context of actual real-time battle on the battlefield, you've got to. I think that then the context shifts a little bit, in that your vision that you're gonna win, that you're gonna endure. You're gonna survive.
Yeah.
Takes over. So you have that vision, right? That's how you end up having that one soldier that runs the battlefield through flying bullets and bombs exploding without blinking. They believe that maybe they've already deduced in their mind that they're already dead. I have nothing to lose.
Right.
I'm going for it, but that all the discipline that it took to prepare for that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think.
I don't know. Did I answer the question?
Well, I think you defined it more, and that's important. And
I wish all interviews were like this, because when you're interviewing for a job, which it's been a long time since I've interviewed for a job, but it's every company when you interview, when you get to that point, if you're interviewing for jobs, or if you're the founder and you're interviewing employees,
right,
there's always this desire to make the interview process like the loop at AWS. They have this thing called the loop. It's an obstacle course.
Okay.
Right. And it's like the company, the people that are devising the loop, or the interview process, are trying to just be as clever as they can get.
It's like you're walking on eggshells.
Well, they're trying to orchestrate it so that they can actually draw out certain things, so they can observe the candidate, and they can actually, so the process of arriving at the one candidate, when you start with 1,000 applications, is really a process of deduction. So when you're just getting started at the very beginning of the process, you have to realize that the people that you're submitting your resume to, their job is to cut that
Yeah.
population of resumes in half, and then half make it to the next step, which is another. And a lot of this is automated nowadays with AI.
Yeah. It's the same thing with college
So-
applications. Like Harvard gets, 20, 30, 40,000 applications. They only have 2,000
Right,
spots.
and they got the gimmies, those that are going to make it no matter what, because those candidates' families have been,
Yeah.
you
Or
know,
like you're like an
donating
Olympian
for
or something.
decades, and you're right, or you stand out in that one way or another.
Yeah.
But
And yeah, they have their methods of trimming it down, like test scores and stuff.
sure,
Those are more so just to, lessen the amount of
yeah, they get
applications.
down to that. We have 15 seats left, so now we actually have to focus on quality.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
No one met the minimum, or we don't have anyone else to meet the minimum. So we must actually look at the application. No, but, I mean, it's a smart approach. You can't go through 40,000 applications and, you got to dwindle those numbers somehow. And it is what it is. How I would answer this question is I think that discipline is I think it is the greatest trait someone can have in general. I think there's little to no situations where it's not helpful. There's little to no lifetimes where it's not helpful. As far as the nature of the question, what the second part says, the single greatest principle the human race itself needs in order to progress further. I think I would have to, if someone was asking me this question, I'd have to ask what that means specifically. So is that
There's a context to it,
like
right?
is the context
There's nothing more powerful than a group of humans that are in lockstep with each other, working towards a common goal.
right? Like not
With discipline.
Like nothing but death is going to stop Elon Musk from getting to Mars or any of his other goals. Something like that.
Barring the laws of physics are not what we think they are, right? Or what he thinks they are.
Right. He is, for that example specifically, he is so disciplined and determined. But I think you did bring up a very good point, and because perhaps the only reason he is that way is because the goals have been presented in front of him, and that's what he's interested in doing. If, for example, those had already been done, he would have a different goal, and that goal would define his life.
He's actually doing it like his life depends on it. So like the existence of humanity depends on it, and he's treating it like his own life depends on it.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, he's committed his money to it. He's committed his
demanded
mouth
he's demanded the discipline
on himself
and the people around him.
Yeah.
If you want to be part of this.
Yeah, it's a harsh world at the top. I mean, you seen the video the other day where he landed.
You could say a harsh world, but it's like it's lonely at the top, but at the same time, I think that he his demanding of excellence of the people around him in order to accomplish these goals is warranted.
I think so.
And
I think the discipline.
I think the discipline is that he observes is important to him in each person, but he also is looking for intelligence,
right?
Imagination, someone's problem solving abilities,
right?
Right. So discipline is just one facet. I think let's call it a three-legged stool. A stool can't stand on one leg. It needs three legs.
But it is one of the legs.
So what are the three legs? Discipline's a leg.
Discipline.
I'd say discipline's a leg.
Yeah, and I think the other two, but the reason why I think discipline is somewhat unique, is because I think that depending on the context,
it's a conscious decision.
Right, but I think depending on the context,
someone that's born with intelligence, that is just born with that brain,
right,
didn't choose to have that brain or not to have that brain.
Right.
Someone that's born without that brain cannot choose to have that brain. You have that brain. That intelligence is not, that level of intelligence is not something that you decide to have. Discipline is something that you decide to have.
Yeah, and you can amplify it and make good choices, conscious choices. to build your
So I would
discipline.
modify your statement just to be the one thing that's within humanity's control. Discipline is the most important thing. Of the three-legged stool,
Right.
and we'll define the other two legs some other day, right?
Well, my point was that the three-legged stool, the other two legs will change in a given scenario, a given context. But I think discipline is a constant. I think it has to be there, no matter
Right,
what.
but the way that's worded, it would say that discipline is actually the surface which you sit on, and the three legs are something else, or it's like a one-legged stool. You know what I'm saying? So it's like
Sure.
so let's think about this as a three-legged stool, and let's just through a process of deduction, go through a process of not being able to populate the other two legs in the surface that you sit on. I wouldn't say that discipline is the only thing. I believe there's other things.
Of course, yeah.
That are important.
Yeah. And,
It's just like with being successful with AI. You just can't buy a bunch of technology and expect it to solve the problem on its own.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
Yeah. So I think that we're in agreement of this, and it could use for rewording, but it's probably good to move.
That's a good topic.
on. It is. I mean,
Yeah.
and it'll come. There's another question. We have some questions about failure and some work ethic type questions, which is all interrelated. But discipline is a really important a term to me. It's a really important.
is that dog
aspect.
distracting you?
A little bit. I don't know if they can hear it. But yeah, is mom home?
Probably.
Hold on. Let me just cut this. She's not home. At least they're not in the driveway.
Yeah.
So I didn't get any notifications.
The dog does this.
Yeah, it's all right.
He's a dog.
It's a dog. Yeah. Okay.
That's what he do.
Question 4.
Let's do it.
All right. So this one is probably a little easier to answer, but 4.
You sure? You're asking me.
Right.
Expect 10 tangents at least.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's all right. But everyone has talent. It is simply a matter of finding what you are talented at. Agree or disagree?
I agree to an extent. I just unfortunately I feel that there are a lot of humans, a lot of people that never discover a talent that they enjoy, that they're passionate about. I think it's just unfortunate. I think it's
Do you think they have them?
yeah, but our process of discovering them is so inefficient,
Yeah. No, that's for sure.
right? So just it's like as a parent, and maybe hopefully you'll get there someday. You'll have kids, and you'll see them start off as like little, very needy little. They poop, and
Right.
they eat, and they
Well, they're
cry, and
selfish creatures.
Yeah, and it's like, what is the gift of this human at that point? There's so much potential, but how can I guide this, or what can I expose this human to that will stimulate that thing that their mind is aligned with? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And a lot of parents will force their kids into something that they've conjured up in their mind, like your mom, and having 300 or 400 figure skating students at the rink back in the day would observe parents who were projecting their desire to have an Olympian
Right.
onto their child, and that's the talent their child had, but the child is, may want to play the piano.
Right.
And they're like, you're a figure skater, So there's actually resistance in the world. There's opinions around you that will guide you towards what you think you're, like the parents will actually, and a lot of times the adults around the children are misguided, or misinformed, or they're just biased in their own way based on their process that they've gone through and just the limited things that they've been exposed to. They can't imagine the potential of this child. This child was exposed to something that was like foreign to them.
Right.
You know, so can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. You want to take care of the dog?
No, the dog's fine.
Okay.
It's all right.
All right. Everyone has talent. It is simply a matter of finding what you're talented at.
Yes. So let's fast forward to, you know, like a young kid, 7, 8, 9 years old, and it's just a matter of them finding what they're talented at based on what's available to them.
Right.
What's in there. So some kids who maybe they're born to athletes, or maybe they're born to musicians. And the assumption is that the parents are both musicians, this child's going to be a musician.
Right.
Right? Like Mr. Holland's Opus is a movie which is a really good example of this. Right? So the but the child may not be, just based on genetics, may actually have inherited certain attributes that are more aligned with a grandparent's tendencies or talents or their wiring.
Right.
You know, so genetics is a lot of times it's focused on physical, you know, but there's also the makeup of the brain, and you know, you could skip a generation and you have like Mozart's great grandchild was actually as pre-wired and pre-configured as he was, but was the child of, you know, 2 professional athletes.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
You know,
And
didn't have access to a piano.
Yeah, and they never find that.
And they never discovered it. You know what I'm saying? So like leaving it, it's so unfortunate, and it's just the way that you worded this. It's like it's really left up to the individual to discover these things on their own. And if you're lucky enough to have a parent or a mentor early on in life that recognizes something and is willing to spend their time, especially their time, you know, and the money's not even that important. It's the time with them to help them, you know, actually, you know, tune in, get plugged in, and you know, and pursue that thing.
Yeah.
It's rare.
Absolutely.
It's extremely rare. So, you know, you hear of a child prodigy or whatever, and in whatever, whether it's athletics or it's academia or whatever, you know, there's typically some adult intervention that enables that.
Right. Yeah. And so I guess my follow-up question.
And in the absence of that particular adult, it may not have happened.
Right. Yeah.
And then that child would go on to be adolescent and would be, or adult, and would discover, you know, and maybe at 30 years old, they pick up the guitar and they're like just a virtuoso. And it's like, oh my God, why didn't I discover this sooner?
Right. Yeah.
So the unfortunate thing about the statement.
Yeah.
So I agree with it. I agree.
Okay.
With the statement.
So then I have a follow-up question, but it's not number 5. It's just something I'm thinking about. Do you think that talent is something that can be cultivated?
Absolutely.
Okay. So
we're doing that right now.
Right. So talent to you is not something that is necessarily innate to your brain wiring or something you inherited, or intellect, like mathematical talent. Would you consider someone who is average in math but immerses themselves in the world of math and becomes extremely skilled at math to be a talent in that field? Would you consider that talent, or is that skill?
It depends on who's asking or who's observing, actually.
All right.
So it depends on the context of that, right? So it depends on who they are surrounded by, right? So if they're fortunate enough, they'll find themselves in a room full of people that are smarter than them, and those people will not view them as talented in math.
Okay.
Because then they would be in a very robust learning environment to maximize their potential. And it just so happens that these other people around them are smarter based on their genetic predisposition and the process that they went through, and having access to mentors early on in life. But all of a sudden, they've arrived at this place where their talent or their skill is not considered talent, right? But they're surrounded by a room full of people that are just like highly talented, and it's like, oh my God, I'm so fortunate to be here. That's a good spot to be in.
It is.
Did I answer your question?
I think so. I think.
Can you reread the question?
Yeah, everyone has talent. It's simply a matter of finding what you're talented at.
Yeah, and I think as an adult, you at any point in your life, you can you can pursue something new, right, and discover a talent that you didn't previously think you had, and find joy in something, and perhaps you can make a living with that if you find it early enough.
Yeah. Colonel Sanders is a good example.
With his herbs and spices, 11 herbs and spices, whatever it was.
He was not young. I mean, I don't know how old
65.
He was. Yeah. And I mean, KFC is a multi-billion-dollar company.
He died before it became a big, before it was realized.
Yeah. But still, it's a good example that it's never too late to start. And I like the saying. It reminded me that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is right now.
Yeah. So the same thing applies to discovering a talent that you just weren't aware of that you had. So I think it's that when you discover that it has you've stumbled upon something that you find that you enjoy, and to the point that you want to do it again, right? And like for me, it's playing the guitar, and I enjoy it. And when I'm around regular people that are not musicians, they're like, "Wow, you're so talented." And I know I'm not, because when I'm around real musicians, I'm like, I'm so lucky to be here.
Right.
But these guys, right? So then I ask a lot of questions, and I learn. I put my good attitude on, and I learn from them. You know what I'm saying? So that's a really great example of what we were previously talking about.
Right.
But it's like I took 9 years of art lessons, and someone could give me a picture of their family, and I could actually draw their family with a pencil, and you could tell who was who, and it would look very much like the picture.
Yeah.
And that was at 10 years old.
Wow. Yeah.
10, 11 years old.
I've seen some of your drawings when you were younger.
Yeah, like under the bed at my parents' house, there's a picture of Mel Gibson or Christy Turlington. Like I had to do portraits or whatever for a class, and it looks just like them. And so it's like it looks uncannily like them. It's like, did you trace this?
Right. Yeah.
So it's yeah. I mean, so it's like you said. Today's a good day to discover a new talent.
Yeah, it's the best day possible.
And I think that question is true throughout the human experience until the day you die.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think talent is a very it's a word that's doing a lot of work in this question. And what I mean by that is that talent it can be considered like somewhat of an umbrella term, especially when you consider all the different talents there are, and everything you can be talented at. And I would imagine that most people have dozens, if not hundreds, of talents that they would be extremely passionate about and very content with.
Yeah.
They never discover that.
So let's talk about your experience a little bit, because this is kind of funny. This is funny. It's interesting too. So when you were 2 or 3 years old, I like to go to Guitar Center because I'm a guitar guy. And when you were 2 or 3 years old, I wasn't really a great guitar player. I couldn't play and sing songs at the time, but like I had a lot of learning to do. And we would go to Guitar Center, and you would always gravitate towards the room where there are the drums, and you would want to get up on the throne and get some drumsticks and just hit those drums, and you loved them. And it was just like, and we would go to this, the Guitar Center near where we lived, and you knew exactly where it was, and you knew exactly where you wanted to go, and you were like, come on, Dad, like this is like, you are pulling on me to go to the drums. Guitar's boring, it's like drums, yeah. And you get there and you were like, and I'm like, all right, maybe this is a talent that we need to, something that has potential. He's interested in it. And your mom and I would talk about this. Right. And maybe he's, he discovered something early. I don't want to interfere. I don't want to get in the way. So I went out and bought an 8-piece drum set. And we had a little house. We had an 1,100 square foot ranch at the time. And we had this big old drum set that filled up the living room. And when you saw it, you were like no. It's like, what is that doing here? It's supposed to be at the store. I don't know that. Like your response to it was like, you didn't.
Maybe that's what made it special.
It was so big, and it was So fast forward to when we started golfing together, and this is a really good example of me wanting you to be a golfer. And because I was never really a great golfer, I'm an okay when it comes to okay golfer when it comes to golfing with a team, and we're doing best ball. It's called best ball because I'll contribute a couple of shots here and there. And I'm like, get started early, right? So we got the golf clubs, and you just you loved hitting the ball. It was just fun, and it was messy at first. But you really started to tune into it, and you started just whacking the balls. And we would go to Dick's Sporting Goods and go to the driving, the little driving range that they have there with the computer. And we have videos of this. You were like 8 or 9 years old, and you were like driving the ball like 150 yards, 160 yards. And you had your little squeaky voice, and it was, and you could probably edit it into the video here so they can see the, it's straight, and it's like, wow.
I'll see if I can, yeah. I mean, I can, if I can get the video, I can do it.
Yeah, so that'd be kind of a neat little commercial or whatever, so. But, then we moved to a new neighborhood, and you made some friends, and then you were like, yeah, I want to hang out with my friends. I don't want to go golf. We had a Tuesday golf thing. I had a membership at a place, and it was like an evening membership. It was like, like the lowest rung membership you can get at the cheapest golf course in town. And we were going every Tuesday. We were about 6 weeks in, and then you were like, I don't want to do this. I want to go hang out with my friends. And, you had a talent, or did you have a skill, but you didn't have the vision. You weren't passionate about it. So it's the 3 legs to the stool. So let's discover let's define what those other 2 legs are. Right. Okay. So you had the discipline for a while. You're maniacally focused, because I told you, if you drove 150 yards, I'd give you $150. Right. Yeah. Right. And you drove 150 yards, and I gave you $150.
I remember that.
Just like when you got 1410 on your SAT, I gave you $1,410. Right. So that's
right. Which I didn't ask for.
Right.
Thank you.
The incentive. I Venmo'd it or Zelled it to you, but it's like that incentive created some discipline. So I think another leg to the stool is the incentive, right?
Of course,
yeah. The incentive dictates the behavior, but you also have to have the vision, which I think is probably the flat part that you sit on, is the dream. The dream's got to be there,
right?
In order for you to have the discipline, and you have to find a way to make money with it, or to have incentives. It's not always money. Right, I have to remind myself it's not always money. Right. Sometimes the incentive is to be able to help people and to help others better their situation or whatever, and that gives you joy. So maybe the other leg is joy.
Could be, yeah.
Right.
But discipline's there.
Discipline's part of it, yeah. Because there's got to be the on a daily basis during the course of your work. If you're doing something that you love, there's going to be those moments that you are actually like elated, and I just love what I'm doing. But there's got to be the discipline along the way to set up those moments of joy. You got to work your ass off to get there too. So to get to that position, you're you go through a lot of schooling and some entry level positions, and you're finally maybe in that leadership position, you're able to inspire people, and that's the moment of joy. But you have to keep everybody organized, and you've got paperwork to do, and you've got reports, and you got, you know what I'm saying? And that's the discipline.
Yeah. You're not gonna enjoy every moment. Yeah. I think that's a fun question, you know?
Yeah. Did we answer it?
Yeah. A while ago. Yeah. Yeah, we answered it.
All right.
Okay. So number 5, this is a question that relates more to me. But I want your thoughts on it. And it's well, not necessarily, but some people would say that Generation Z is lazy and people are worried. Do you think this worriedness is warranted? Why or why not?
Yeah. I love this question.
Yeah.
I love this question because going back to the beginning of human existence, every generation has always said shit about the younger generation.
Yeah.
Every step of the way,
Yeah.
right? They lack focus. They lack commitment. They're not interested. Whatever it is. They listen to that rock music.
Right.
You know, they're driving their fast cars. They're loud. Whatever it is. There's always something.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that it just unfortunately, and I hope I'm not like this. If you ever catch me saying stuff about these kids nowadays,
Right.
to like relative to your kids,
Yeah.
please remind me of this conversation.
Okay.
And I give you permission to set me straight, to remind me at that moment, saying, Dad, every generation has stuff
Right.
to say about kids. You know, it's like these kids with their devices, their, you know, back in the day, we used to go outside all day, and my parents would say, you know, come home when the street lights come on.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was living. Like right now, the living humans that are living are not living.
Right.
They're not really enjoying life because they're not getting outside until the lights come on. Right? The human experience has changed. That's all.
Yeah.
So anyway, what's the question again?
Okay. Some people would say that Generation Z is lazy and people are worried. Do you think this worriedness is warranted? Why or why not?
So Generation Z in particular? I mean, we can talk about Generation X, which is me, and I can tell you some of the stuff they said about us, and I can tell you something they said about
right
the baby boomers.
The
before
reason
me.
why it's Gen Z.
all those hippies smoking pot in the 70s,
right.
Marching on Washington and getting all, like not focused on work and their education.
Yeah.
That generation ended up being the most productive generation in human history, most inventive. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, but they're the generation before them would say shit about them, where they were taking psychedelics, they were taking a lot of drugs, they were kind of like in their younger years, they were basically, experiencing life in a different way that was very different than the,
Right.
So
Well, people hate change.
they do. So you think about, prior to that generation, there was the sort of like the greasers and it was kind of like the doo-wop rock age before, before 70s rock. I can relate it to music. There was 70s, there was 60s rock, there was the 50s, right? And like at some point in history, everybody dressed up. Everybody, like, men wore suits every day,
right.
even if they only owned one, right? And at some point, men stopped wearing suits. Right. So the generation that always wore suits looked at this generation that stopped wearing suits. I don't know if it was like they went from a suit to a sport coat and slacks.
Right.
And it's like, what are you doing? These kids nowadays.
Right.
You got a sport coat and khakis.
Right. Yeah.
right?
It's like how unprofessional.
How unprofessional, right? This generation,
Right.
right? So it's something as nuanced as that. The music is very pronounced because it's like, but it's like it's represented in a lot of different ways in our culture. Like we're in suits doing this right now. I mean,
No,
it's
we're
like
not.
we're wearing what we were wearing before we got here,
Yeah.
which is very casual. And this is what we wear around the house, like a t-shirt and shorts.
Yeah.
You know?
Don't let the watch fool you.
Like, how dare you like some podcasters may look at us and say, this is very unprofessional.
Right.
You should be wearing a suit.
Yeah, maybe.
Right? This generation,
Yeah.
The
reason why I picked Gen Z specifically is because I'm part of it, but also because we're nearing the workforce. So Generation Z is currently entering the workforce and continuing to enter, and then Generation Alpha in a few years. So the reason why is that there is this. I think social media is partly to blame for giving everyone a voice. There's a contingent of people who do say that Gen Z is lazy, and there is a contingent of Gen Z who is lazy, but I would say that that's true for all generations.
Okay, so there's so many different ways to unpack this, right? So now just imagine that the current generation of leaders that are on the receiving end of this new young crop that's coming in, they're the ones that are making the statement.
Okay, let's assume that.
Let's assume that, and then you can reread the question, and we can reset and answer it from a different perspective, right? But let's just assume that the current leadership is receiving these young people, and this is their statement, right? Let's look at the stool.
Okay.
Right? Do they understand their dreams? Do they have the discipline? Right? Are they incented properly? Like, I think that there's a certain part of this is that there's a disconnect between the leaderships, this generation of leadership versus the last generation of leaderships,
Right.
leadership skills. You can actually go apply the question to them, saying those old leaders, maybe it's like Jack Welch or whatever, is like looking at the current crop of leaders saying, you guys don't know how to lead.
Right.
Maybe they don't know how to receive these young people. Maybe they don't know how to lead them. Maybe they don't know how they, maybe in a lot of cases, especially in the startup world, there is not a training program. You're a warm body. You're hired to do a job. You're expected to do that job without any training whatsoever.
Right.
And the leadership is not willing to get deep in the weeds to understand the job that they hired that person to do. And because a lot of times in startups, you got people that are assembled from all different, possible, edges of the country or the world or whatever, and they're brought together through some, random selection process, and then they don't all agree with each other. A lot of times they don't agree with each other. Sales and marketing are always fighting with each other. They can never agree because they're always trying to get their idea to be there. And then you insert this young person into this dynamic where leadership is not agreeing with each other. They're not on the same page. They're not rowing in the same direction. They hired a warm body just to get, maybe it's a business development rep, to get meetings. And, there's no direction whatsoever. The kid's out on an island and
Right.
They're like, oh, these kids nowadays.
Yeah.
Fucking lazy. They don't have any direction. There's no structure. There's no enablement. There's nothing. There's nothing there
Right.
for that young person to come in, and they come in and they're like, what do I do? They're in a new environment that they've never been exposed to, and there's not an onboarding program. So there's that situation. Now contrast that to an established company like IBM that has a summit program where they bring in young people from colleges all over the place. They have a few that they have relationships with, and and a lot of them come in through, they had a parent or an uncle or a neighbor that was an employee, and they come into and they have like a program where they work in different parts of the company to learn the business,
Right.
right? And they have a manager who teaches them hands-on how to do the job, right? So in this job, this is how you do your job. You're going to do this for 6 months. You do this for 6 months. You do this for a year, and they have a way to advance them to, a leadership role.
Right.
And that's the whole point. And the point is to bring in young blood to dilute. It's a dilution process, right? Because you have an aging workforce, and you want to bring in real young, smart people that are motivated.
You need generational turnover.
And you're basically orchestrating that generational turnover.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So I think I really.
So that's a completely different experience for that young person. So now in this process, they're not bringing in, this generation. They're bringing in the best.
Right.
Right. That meet the criteria to come in. And having worked at IBM and worked with a lot of the Summit hires, they are exceptional. Right. So that statement is coming from the perspective of someone who, is misinformed,
right.
or is, it relative to what? This generation versus this year's crop versus last year's crop. It's not the same. It's always, this is like this happens with sports teams too. The freshman class, they're a bunch of schleps. It's like a rite of passage to be able to talk shit about the freshmen when you're a sophomore. You know what I'm saying? There's some of that too. So I think that statement is just it's a loaded question.
Yeah, it is.
It pisses me off.
Yeah, it does.
It's aggravating. Yeah, it's aggravating because
I think it is.
Even being later in my life, I look at that question and I'm like, that is just it's a cop out.
Yeah. And a lot of people, I personally think
it's a bunch of adults not taking ownership.
Yeah.
Right?
I personally believe it's specifically from the perspective of people who are in some sort of position of power or leadership role, and the way they lead just doesn't apply to the next generation.
Imagine if I said that choice of words, if I said that about my kids.
Right.
Do you think you and I would be sitting here right now if I was like that? Like these
Probably
kids
not.
Nowadays.
Probably not.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I was like outwardly like that towards you verbally.
Right.
Like, abusive in that way. Verbally abusive in that way.
Right.
So I think it's irresponsible as well. That statement is irresponsible.
Well, of course it is.
Yeah.
And it's because people who are in leadership positions, they have not acquired the necessary skills to apply their leadership skills to this next generation because of that disconnect.
I think our culture in general has lost its way, and there's sort of this even though this is like every generation says something about it, I think that there's actually starting to be it's like the process of assimilating new humans into our process of being a human is starting to devolve, starting to break down.
You want to unpack that?
Yeah, I just like that question obviously struck a chord, right? So I see it, and I think there's a certain aspect of that where the current generation of adults is not taking ownership of, you don't see a lot of people, adult humans, taking ownership of the situation like they used to when it comes to other people's taking care and having, like, being mindful and actually caring about the like a young person. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And maybe it's not that they don't care, because we're seeing the receptiveness to you on LinkedIn. I think that maybe there's just there's a disruption in connectivity there.
Okay.
Right. And I think it has to do with the fact that like we have all these devices and the kids are like kind of like doing this and maybe families aren't having dinner together at the table together. Maybe it's a little like the experience is everybody's becoming more like isolated in their own little, their own little bubble. And we're all occupying our own little bubble in the company of each other, and not interacting and
Right.
I'm saying, and not caring, and we're becoming like less aware of like these young people that are coming into the workforce. So at the same time, I can if you can read the question again, I'll answer the question a totally different way, right?
You want me to read it again?
Yeah, read it again.
Some people would say that Generation Z is lazy and people are worried. Do you think this worriedness is warranted? Why or why not?
Yeah, it's absolutely warranted. Yeah, because I mean, these kids are coming into work and they have, they can't put down their phone.
Right.
It's like they're cyborgs. It's been an extension of them their entire life since they were like toddlers. You can tell that they've never lived without an iPhone in their hand. And we're in meetings and they can't put it down. Like we have a rule that you actually have to put your phones in a basket, and you can tell they're so unsettled and uncomfortable because
Right.
there's a piece of them that is that is detached and over there.
Right.
And for a time we weren't saying shut them off so we could hear things buzzing, and they were all kind of like, like this, and it was like, so it's like this is a problem.
Right.
This is a huge problem. So we had them shut them off. We put them over there, and it took a good 6 months for them to adapt, to them to achieve comfort in having actually conversation, which the level of comfort that it took them 6 months to achieve would have, before the iPhone was a thing, would have taken about a week.
Right.
For people to get to know each other. Right? So there's the problem.
Right.
Right there.
Do you think
Right?
Do you think it's Generation Z's responsibility to solve that problem, or do you think it's the old generation's responsibility to nurture the new one?
It is embedded in our culture, and so what is the problem we're trying to solve? Is it the device? Like you like in our previous conversation when we went out to dinner, you said if you could like basically get rid of all of this stuff, social media, and the phone is fair game as well. And if there was just a button for you to press it, you would press it in a heartbeat.
Yep.
To reset everything and get everybody kind of actually, functioning on a human level with each other, right? So, yeah. What was the question again?
Well, the follow-up question was
follow-up
that
question.
so we have this problem of, for example, phones in the workplace or human interaction slowing.
Yeah, and you asked if it was whose responsibility it was to correct this.
So is it up to?
Is it correctable?
Is it correctable? Yeah, that's a good question as well, because like you said, it is kind of embedded in the human
The introduction
experience.
of technology into our culture has changed our culture.
Is it something that we need to correct, or is it something that we need to adapt to? Is it more viable to strive more towards the old ways of being technology-less in a meeting, or should we find a way to incorporate it and embrace it?
Well, so the do you have Wi-Fi on your phone when you're at school?
Yeah.
Did you have that at Naples Academy?
No. We couldn't have her. We could only have our phones because by law we're allowed to have our phones.
So they made a decision to that was an intervention. They made a decision that they were not going to allow. They actually had a blocker.
They did actually the first day.
They
Or
had
the first year they were open, they allowed phones.
Yeah,
And the second year they didn't.
And then they had a blocker and everything. Like I couldn't even access my phone when I was in Carline to pick you up.
Yeah, no signal. And at my current school,
so it was a dead zone. They created a dead zone.
yes, yeah. So no.
Right.
phones.
So that to them was a solution to that problem,
yeah, and it was a problem to them.
and they had a solution.
Right.
They solved it. Because when you get on school grounds, it's time to focus on school.
Yeah, And at my current school, you can't access social media on the network. So most people just download a VPN, and that lets them access like social media, and
Right.
they can't block that.
Right.
So it's not like they just let you go like whatever on your phone, and then they leave it up to the teacher to decide the phone policy in the classroom. So most of my teachers, because I'm in like the AP classes, they're like, put them away.
Right.
It's time to focus.
So I just wanted to, I wanted to point out a relevant example
right.
that would provide a partial answer to your question. So it was the organization's responsibility in that context to take ownership and solve that problem, right?
Right.
So I think you start to run a fine line between allowing individuals to make these decisions on their own and having the government make these decisions for them, or organizations. So it's fair game for companies or organizations to make these decisions. Like when you walk into a meeting to have a basket where everybody puts their phone,
Right.
that's a way of handling it.
Yeah,
and
that's the company's prerogative.
Or the manager of the team, so
Right.
it's like it might not even be a company thing, So, like if the company created a dead zone, all of a sudden the sales team would be disconnected from their customers, and that would not be a good thing, right? So,
but I think something important to bring up is that this problem specifically of social media and how it's proliferated in society is not a Generation Z or Alpha problem. It's a societal problem or societal attribute of the human experience that it doesn't affect young people specifically or older people specifically. Yeah. It's everyone. Unless, you're like really old. Typically they don't use phones.
So let's role play. You're the young person coming into a new organization, and you're on your phone. You're like, oh, new job, new place. You're on your phone,
right.
And then the manager or the leadership, they're on their phone, like, oh, new guy, hey, how you doing? They're on their phone. It's happening on both sides.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. To your point, it's absolutely happening on both sides.
I think that it's just been purported in such a way that the employers are not Generation Z, they're the older generation, so they look at the new one, they go, oh, work's not getting done, what can I point to? It's the phone.
It's this work from home thing is the problem now.
That's what they're
pointing to
thing.
They're starting to point to right now. Yeah.
But what I'm trying to get at is that people in leadership positions are not able to effectively lead the new generation in the same way that they led the old generation because of an obvious generational disconnect or adaptation or evolution. And I think that a large proportion of those people just call it there. They just say, oh, they're uncoachable.
Well, I think both sides are both impaired by their respective distractions.
Right.
Which is their,
but I'm not seeing an effort.
Their device that's in their hand on both sides, both
right.
Leadership, management, and employee, intern, whatever their position is, they're all impaired by and distracted. Though they have achieved higher levels of productivity with their devices.
Right.
Levels of productivity that were not possible 20 years ago.
Right.
So back then they when they didn't have email,
right.
Before email,
or like Excel,
they had this thing called interoffice mail.
Interoffice.
Do you know what interoffice mail is?
Is that physical mail?
It was actually physical.
Yeah.
Notes.
So you'd have like a company PO box or something.
And there was actually a person whose job was to route interoffice mail.
Yeah.
So on your desk, you would have a sort of a thing that you would put your envelope in.
Yeah.
And on the envelope, it would have where you're sending it from to where you're sending it to. Yeah. These were manila folders, and they'd have a string that would, so it was like...
The stamp market must have took a huge hit. Like stamps.
There wasn't stamps in interoffice mail. It was all basically by courier. So it was a person who did the actual... They would walk around with the cart, and he would run at certain times of the day. And...
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's, for the most part, new information. For me.
For you, yeah.
I mean, it's obvious that they would have had to use physical mail, but as far as
To
like
have-
the
to have-
actual process. I'm
To
aware
have
of.
something that was a business process that needed to be documented, that's how things were handled.
Right, and that was an important thing, where that doesn't exist today. Yeah.
I caught the tail end of interoffice mail.
Yeah.
I had email and I had interoffice mail. But there are certain processes that had to use interoffice mail at the time until they totally got rid of it.
Right.
They needed a certain level of security in the file servers and all
Oh,
that
yeah.
stuff to, you know, for certain
So
processes.
they didn't just start emailing all the important documents and stuff. It took a little bit for them to be like, okay, this is good. We're just gonna do that.
Yeah, there were certain things that, so whenever workloads are shifted from one infrastructure to another, there's going to be sort of a hierarchy of workloads, the way that they're organized. And, you know, it could be organized or prioritized based on most expensive to least expensive, or most portable to least portable, or things that are most sensitive to regulations to least sensitive to regulations, or whatever. And that'll kind of dictate the way that you can organize the transference of that process from one infrastructure to another.
Yep. Okay.
So interoffice mail stuck around for a little while for certain essential, highly secure processes. Yeah.
Yeah. Good question. Or
Yeah. These are all good questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is fun.
good. Okay.
I
We got
thoroughly recommend
Oh.
that every parent sit down with their have your teenage son or daughter watch this video, and maybe it'll stimulate the a conversation, right? So anyway, next question.
Okay, number 6. So this is a good one. I like this one. Failure can be the single greatest tool for learning, whilst also be the single greatest obstacle for success, depending upon your perspective. Agree or disagree?
I totally agree with that. I think that just based on an individual's basic wiring.
Yeah.
Some people are wired to try again, and some people are wired to not try again, right? Just based on that, they're like the kid in high school. I've told you this so many times, to the point that you've heard it, but I always end up saying it
Right.
for the benefit of somebody else that's present. But that kid that said, if I never try, I will never fail. And I'm like, yeah, you go, man. Right? Yeah,
Yep.
you're right. I thought about it, and I was like, that was profound.
Yeah.
And he never tried at anything, and he never failed at anything. But he's a happy person.
Yeah,
You know?
I mean, I
So-
think the question can mean different things for different people, just because of the word success in here.
Well, that was my version 1 answer to your question.
Okay.
So it's like, yeah,
You're right. I mean, there's so many perspectives.
yeah. I mean, I could emulate somebody else's response to that question. That a thought process that I think is possible.
What's your response?
Please read the question again. Is about failure.
Failure can be the single greatest tool for learning, whilst also being the single greatest obstacle for success, depending upon your perspective.
Yes, depending on your perspective. All right, so let's unpack that right there, where
Okay.
it's someone that works in a established organization that has everything well defined, and versus, let's say, a first line manager in that context versus a founder of a startup company, or a VP or director in an established company. It doesn't matter. So you're in a leadership position in an established company. In the established company, in that context, failure would be very much looked down upon. You're not going to hire people that fail.
Right.
You're not going to hire people that exhibit failure on their resume. You're going to interview them with questions to weed out failure. Any indication of failure, you're going to want to just pull the cord on that candidate immediately. There's no room for failure, because if I'm just hiring somebody to do a standard function that exists at every company possible, like any kind, like you're doing I don't know, you're working in finance or HR or operations or wherever, and this is just like your job is to do this specific thing in SAP or in Oracle or whatever or in Microsoft, and you just got to do that one thing really well, and there's no margin for error. So if you're going to tell me a story during the interview process that you failed at this, I'm not going to hire you for this.
Right.
Period. Right? The startup situation, on the other hand, you're looking for people that have calluses. You're looking for people that have gone through 3 or 4 or 5 startups that have a good collection of success and failure.
Right.
You want people that are going to understand some of the minefields and the pitfalls and some of the things that you don't want to do that. Let me tell you a story, right? Because we tried this before. We did this at this other company and it didn't go well, right? You make your own decision, of course, right? You're trying to inform the founder that you just don't want to do it this way, or you don't want to, whatever. Maybe they're open to it or they're not open to it, but you want people that actually have calluses, that have been through the rigors, that are
absolutely
groomed in the startup ecosystem, which is a mixed bag of success and failure. If you're a startup founder and you're interviewing salespeople and you're looking at all these candidates and all of them are like, President's Club, and everybody's got success. You've got these 10 candidates. You have to ask every single one of them, tell me about a time you failed and how you handled it. Because if you can't find someone that can handle failure and that, you can't take a sales rep from a big company.
It goes back to discipline.
That made President's Club every year, and they were making $750,000, and they're like all that. They have a certain sense of arrogance about themselves that their skills at the big company selling is going to transfer over. Depending on what you're selling, sometimes it's very relationship oriented. So you're bringing your book of business, that could work. But anyway, it's like, you have to. There's going to be some failure. There's the guy that comes in from the big company with the book of business, and I've been selling to these companies for 15 years, and they're going to buy from me, only to discover that they're not in a buying cycle for whatever the startup company has to sell.
Right.
Right? They're the right companies. They're the right titles.
Right.
They're who the startup company thinks their ICP is, but it's not.
Right person, wrong time type thing.
Or the market's not ready for the solution.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that'll represent some obstacles and failure that individual has not had to really wrestle with in the past. And most likely they're just going to pull the cord and go back to the big company. They're not going to last.
Yeah. I want to go into the fear. Fear of failure.
The failure is, anyway, yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, I could just keep going on that tangent, but it's like,
well, it's an important question.
You can approach this question from many different angles. So failure when it comes to like a young person who's starting something new that they've never done before, but they find it's something that they are passionate about. Like they love music, so they want to learn a musical instrument.
Yeah.
So
the way I would attack this,
there's a lot of failure. It's just like when you and I started working out and going to the gym together.
Right.
We would do sets to failure. Yeah. We would actually seek failure.
Exactly.
Failure was the goal in each set. Exactly. If you're going to grow, you've got to work your muscles to failure. Right? So that's the same philosophy that Arnold Schwarzenegger applied towards everything that he did in life, to failure, right?
Yeah.
Repetition, practice, discipline, vision, right? You have the dream, you've got the discipline, you've got what are the 3 legs? We gotta write this down.
The 3 legs, yeah. I can
stool?
write it down. But I think some underlying important thing about this question, which I'll read it one more time. Failure can be the single greatest tool for learning, whilst also being the single greatest obstacle for success, depending upon your perspective. So I think what's really important is how you view failure as a concept itself. And I think a lot of people don't actually view it as something to be sought after, and they don't actually view it as something they can learn from and really learn from.
Like
And
the goal isn't to fail,
right,
but the goal is to, as you're going through your process, to recognize the different points of failure,
right,
and to learn from it.
exactly. And I think it's without knowing that failure can be that useful tool, of course you're going to be afraid of it. And that leads people to avoid it. And then they never learn.
So if I never try, I never fail.
Never try, you never fail. And you also never succeed.
Right. So if you're smart, I'm not saying this is not my advice to you.
Okay.
Right. But this is the dominant theme in society is if you're smart, you'll find something that you can do and do well and make a living on.
Okay.
Right? That's just the dominant theme, right? So you find something that you can do.
Right.
And you can do well.
Something stable.
And you can make money on. Right? Like you can be a carpenter. Which is, to me, I would love to do woodwork. It would be awesome.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Oh, that would be.
We should set something up in the garage.
Well, let's do it.
I mean, that's always interested me, but I've never.
Let's do that. New venture.
Cool.
We'll start making some stuff. We'll see if we can sell it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything you can make money from, right? But
I mean, you got to be able to pay for the
machines,
the equipment
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have so much space back there. Anyway, yeah. I mean, I'm personally really fond of this question, and I think it's more so useful for people who just don't view failure as something that's integral to the learning process. I'm gonna skip over to number 9 here because it goes along pretty well.
But let me finish that before we go to the next one.
Okay.
I just want to finish that thought, right? So you find something that you can do really well and you can make money with.
Okay.
Right? And then that becomes your routine. And you don't really venture much outside of that. Right? And that's people end up finding something they can do until it's interrupted by innovation, or like the company they work for goes out of business or gets bought out and people get laid off and then they have to reskill.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So in that mode of operation where you found something that you can do it well, and you can make money, you go on this track for a period of time until it's interrupted, right? And if it goes uninterrupted, then you're fortunate to do an entire 30 or 40 year working career where you're working in the CNC machine, and you become the CNC mechanic, and then you become the guy that's in charge of all the asset management for the facility. Then you become the facilities manager, and then you're in charge of all of the facilities, and then you become the chief operating officer. You follow that track, and
Right.
you understand the business to the ground level, right? It's awesome, right? If that goes uninterrupted, then great, so. But along the way, failure is part of the process.
Right. Not everything is going to perfectly fall into your lap, or you're not going to pick up something or try something new and have it go perfectly.
Right. You're doing this job and you see this other job and you're like, you mind if maybe you talk to your supervisor, you mind if I get trained on that? So if you're in a company that provides that training, you get trained on that. In a startup company, it's like, do you mind if I try that? And they'll be like, fucking stay in your lane, man.
Right.
This is my job,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, no, this is my job.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Well, now I'm not going to skip to number 9 because it was just closer to the topic at hand. But now number 7 is relevant.
All right. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. 7, being a startup owner is one of the toughest jobs on the planet. Agree or disagree?
I agree, for sure. Yeah. So, like starting your own thing from scratch without good mentorship is a recipe for failure. Being a startup founder, and not being open to new information to inform your understanding so that you can inform your decision making is a recipe for failure, right? Like quitting your job at the bank to go start a company before you've done anything
Right.
is a recipe for failure.
Yeah.
There's so much you can do to start to prepare yourself for being a founder, like earlier on. You know, it's like having success in a sort of like in a laboratory environment or in a bubble or at a big corporation, and you did something special and you solved a problem, and thinking that that's the basis for a company is not necessarily the case. And quitting your job to become a founder of a company and taking investor money to fund this thing and bringing on employees before you've actually secured a single customer is irresponsible,
Right.
and is a recipe for failure, right? Like 90% of them fail.
Yeah.
You know, it's like going into like a product development cycle for like 2 or 3 years before you spend an ounce of time on go to market is a recipe for failure.
Yeah.
Right? So there's so many recipes for failure. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you do it, you know?
It's hard to navigate.
It's extremely hard to navigate, and there's all these playbooks out there, and there's a lot of resources out there. But if you're not open to that information to inform your understanding, then you really shouldn't go out and be a founder of a startup company.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to be a sponge. You've got to be coachable. You've got to be,
Disciplined.
also a good mentor. So
Yeah. And a leader too. Eventually.
well, that's part of being a good leader is being a good mentor. And if you're a good leader with mentorship in your DNA, you're going to naturally identify people that are coachable.
Right.
And that's actually an ingredient for success.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that a huge thing about being a startup owner is beyond all of the challenges we've just laid out. Even if you get on your feet and you get running and your company is actually palatable, making money is a whole nother challenge when you don't have any credibility at first. You know, you don't have any
So that
credence.
that ends up being a sort of a how do I say this? It's a sticking point for a lot of technical founders, you know, where because they're a lot of times they're introverted and they're brilliant in their in their domain, and to actually step outside of your comfort zone to engage the universe to find a customer is not comfortable. It's not natural. Right. But if the product itself or the offering, the service is born from a customer, if the customer is the first thing that happens, if you start with a customer and then it's like, oh shit,
Right.
I need a company, that's the best possible situation.
Well, that's why they say start with a problem, work backwards.
You start with the problem and work backwards. Absolutely. You don't design, this is a Steve Jobs thing. You don't design a product and then go out or a solution, because this is no problem. It's not even a solution.
Right.
It's a capability. You don't develop a capability and then search for a problem. You have to find the problem, but you also have to do your research before you write a stitch of code, before you start investing in assets and machinery and whatever you need to support that idea. You've got to do your homework, and you've got to before you even spend any money on any of that, you've got to understand who your customer is going to be. What is the problem that you're going to solve? You've got to actually have some conversations with those people. If this problem was solved, what would be the monetizable benefit for you, for your business? What would that mean for you in your career? Like, would that be important? Would that move the needle? Would that make an impact?
Right.
Having those conversations is essential. I think it was Blue Apron or whatever. Before they had their meal kits and everything like that, they went out and stalked women that were grocery shopping and approaching them and asking them if they could shadow them in their process. And they gave a lot of women the creeps, because they were like, that's a weird question to ask. And they're like, well, so they had to go through a process of learning how to approach women. They had to get the conversation going. They had to be able to convert the conversation to an actual person that's willing to allow them into their process, into their life, to shadow them through making a list and shopping, and how do you plan everything, and it's all for the week. Is it for a 2-week period? What are the meals that you're planning? What are the ingredients? What periodicity do you buy your spices? Do you buy this, that, and the other thing? And it took them a long time to find one, and then they found through word of mouth and introduction. From there, they ended up having, in a high density of women in a geographical region that were participating in this exciting new concept, this process, this startup, right? And they achieved critical mass in a certain geographical zone. Uber did the same thing, and they went geography by geography. They learned how to do it in one geography before they went after another geography, right? And I don't know what kind of cars they started with, but it's like, it's like, dude, you got a car? Yeah, I got a car. All right. We're good to go. Let's, find some other people with cars that'll,
Yeah, I mean, Uber.
So you find your customer, you find the problem that you're solving, you find your customer, you intimately understand why there's value.
Yeah.
For the customer, and what's motivating them. And how can you model it and scale it? And how can you codify it? And, build a small functional instance of that business, and then like pick your spots,
right?
Delicately, like very purposefully, very deliberate. You don't scale prematurely, right?
Yeah.
And you scale incrementally.
Yeah.
If it's your first time, you don't do it all at once.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's kind of like Amazon's approach to book selling, as we talked about earlier.
We started with books.
Well, more specifically, what I'm talking about is they don't make 1,000 books and then sell them. They wait till an order comes in. They make the book with the money.
It didn't start like that, though.
But it's like that now.
But they started with selling other people's books. So there were relationships that they had to establish with the publishers, and then there was like all the producers of books, the manufacturers of books, and all. They had to establish all those relationships over time. But they just started with just reselling books. So they had to figure out the puzzle of, what books are we going to sell?
Yep.
All you have to do is start with one best-selling book.
Yeah.
And get that ad in front of the right people that would care about that topic, that would click on that banner ad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you have to buy that when you're getting started like that. I'm just imagining, maybe I don't know. Back then, I'm thinking you'd have to buy 1,000 of those books. Yeah. So what do you start with?
A lot of people
like cookbooks, encyclopedias.
Right. Well, I think what's that? Whatever.
Back in the 50s, there were dudes that went door to door selling encyclopedias to families.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you couldn't get it otherwise. You'd have to go to the library.
Where are your kids going to get the information?
Right.
There's more information in these Britannicas than there is at the library.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like demographic specific too, because like they can be like, oh, these people with this education go here. They're lacking this. We'll sell them this, stuff like that. But yeah. Okay. So I think that's good. And
can you restate the question though? I don't know if we answered it entirely.
Well, no, we did.
Yeah.
Being a startup owner is one of the toughest jobs on the planet, and we went over why, the variables, so much risk.
Yeah, I mean, so there's so many different jobs on the planet that have.
That's why I said one of.
Yeah.
Oil rig.
Yeah.
Guy,
I was going to say there's. That's
underwater well.
There's certain jobs that are There are some startup founders
SEAL
that are
Team
doing
7.
some crazy startups that may put your life or limb at risk.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I don't know enough to actually respond to that question.
Right. We can't
sufficiently.
We could never give as good of an answer as someone who is in a position where they're currently the owner of a startup that has a 99.9% chance to fail, and if it fails, then everything is on the line. And there are people like that who are really just running off belief.
I've worked with many of them.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of startups that are going out of business since the Silicon Valley Bank collapse.
Right.
It's unfortunate. Yeah. So they're that's created a gap in funding for a lot of companies.
All right.
Which was unforeseeable.
Of course.
And that was out of their control. So there's so many things that can happen on a daily basis as a founder.
Yeah.
That's out of your control, that can completely buckle you.
Right. I mean, COVID's a huge example.
Oh, yeah.
That's not an everyday thing, but that's a thing everyone can relate to.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Affected everybody. Yeah, okay. Number 8 is my favorite question on this entire list. I love this question.
All right.
So it's a difficult question, and I don't know if there's an answer, but let's give it a shot. A TED Talk led by Angela Duckworth presents strong findings that show that grit is the greatest indicator of success, but specifies that we are unsure how grit is built. How do we build grit?
We're doing it right now.
Are we?
So that same TED Talk inspired me so much, and I'm glad that you stumbled across that.
You've seen it? Yeah.
I've seen it.
Yeah, I like it.
And I really it's probably one of the best TED Talks that I've seen. And so just this mantra that you and I have, that is, like, fail fast and fail often, right, and failure is one of the greatest learning tools. That was inspired by her. Right. Those sayings were somewhat in some incarnation or another were things that I had been exposed to during the course of my career. You live and you learn. There's different ways of saying it, but it wasn't until I saw that TED Talk that it really hit home, and how that was like a really important thing for me to share with you. Right. So, and it's just kind of cool that you just brought that up, and this wasn't even planned.
I mean, it's a good question, and it's not outdated. It's like a few years old, the TED Talk.
Yeah, but I can imagine that she would be happy to know that she's had an impact on people's lives with that TED Talk.
Yeah,
a good one.
I think I have an answer. But I'm curious, how does someone, not us specifically, how does someone go about equipping themselves with grit for the highest possible chance of success?
So, like she says, it's like, it's not something that you can you can just like go and buy some grit off the table, off the shelf, whatever, and give it to your kid and be like, you now have grit,
Yeah.
And feeding them grits for breakfast every morning is not going to give them grit. Right. There's no like 10-step process to imparting grit on a young person. Right. So I think that grit can present itself in different forms. So there are those that have physical grit in athletics. In some context, it involves, like football, there's a certain amount of, violence and fatigue and impact and things you have to endure, like in boxing too, so like grit in that context may be something that's different than a figure skater, or a ping pong player or something like that, you know what I'm saying? But like, But what I'm saying is there's some nuance from one thing to the other, but the one dominant theme is just the stick-to-itiveness in just not giving up, and you get knocked down, and though it might take a little while. Sometimes it takes a day, sometimes it takes a month. Depends on what buckles you. Like the loss of a loved one can really, when my dad passes away, it's going to impact me greatly. I'm gonna need your support when that happens, right? Yeah. It might take a little while for me to get over it, right? So, but being able to persevere and pick yourself up, So you hear a lot of celebrities talk about it. Denzel Washington, Sylvester Stallone, it's not how many times you fall down, it's how you pick yourself up, and so that's So we've kind of defined grit. How do you get grit?
Right.
And I think there's I don't think it's so binary in that either you have grit or you don't have grit.
Like you have a little, you have a lot, you have some.
I don't know. Are there varying levels of grit, or can you have like a high level of grit for a certain time in your life, and then something happens and you just kind of like,
it's more periodic.
You're like
more, mood based,
or it's like something so profound happens that it just knocks the grit out of you.
Right.
Literally, right? So it's like, but what she was sharing was those those most successful people had that one thing that was, the one thing that was shared amongst them all was grit.
Right.
And unshakable grit, that no matter what happens in your life, you're going to maintain that grit and that discipline.
Right.
And
grit might be a better word for that, like
driving towards that vision. Yeah, is grit the is this the next set of questions here?
Yeah.
Are we going to this page next?
Yeah.
I mean, we gotta draw a stool. You want me to do it on here? Over here. So we've got the part that you sit on, and we've got the three legs. 1, 2, 3. And we said discipline was one of them, right? Discipline.
You like that pen?
Yeah, it's like an old style fountain pen
that
you dip into the ink, whatever, back in the 1850s.
It just has the cartridge, but
well before my time. Yeah, this is kind of neat.
Well, I think
discipline. So then
I didn't think it was.
We'll have
before
candidates for the other three legs. So we agree that 3 legs are the minimum number of legs that are needed to stand up a stool.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's what we're basically just looking for.
It would be hard to balance.
We can get into the other parts, which are the brackets that hold the rest of the stool together.
Right. But what is the stool? What is the stool itself?
Well, the stool is kind of like a thing you sit on.
Right. But in this analogy, is the stool life? Is it success? Success?
Well, so we have to define what the part that you're sitting on is.
Okay.
Right.
Right. All this stuff
is.
And
there's the purpose of the stool itself. So that's what you were asking. Not exactly what this surface is, but let's we don't have to define this right now. But I'm just I want to draw it so when we think of things. We had grit was one attribute. Grit.
Right, and I'm saying, is grit a better replacement for discipline?
No, I think they're mutually exclusive or interrelated in some respects. So you can have discipline. You can have discipline because it's just part of your monotonous routine. Or is there a difference between routine and discipline? You know what I'm saying? So
I think grit is more oriented towards an ambitious, specific goal, rather than discipline.
I disagree. I think discipline is more geared towards a certain near-term or long-term goal. I think the grit is something that is just innate about the individual, that no matter what they're doing as they're going through their process to achieve this dream, this is the dream.
Grit's more of a constant.
Or the goal. I think the grit is actually the thing that
to hold it differently.
That keeps you as an individual going no matter what's going on. Like the world can be on fire around you.
Right.
You've got grit. You're on vacation and there's a tsunami. You're going to find a way to, you know what I'm saying? To persevere.
Yeah.
You're not going to give up. Right. And discipline to me is more part of the methodical day to day. You've got your routine, you've got your thing that you're gonna,
Right.
So grit is, I would definitely say, is. Right. So we'll get to this. Let's table this.
Okay.
We'll stool it for now.
Okay.
Right. So that's that. We know that's there. Get back to that. What's the question again?
How do we build grit?
How do you build grit? I don't think she could answer that question.
I can give my take on it, and we can critique that and go back and forth.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So I really thought about this for like a long time.
I have too, but I want to hear your take on it.
So my theory, which I have no proof that is not anecdotal, but I consider myself a gritty individual, or someone who has a degree of grit. And the way I built that in my life, and I think this is likely not applicable to everyone, but my answer to the question is that to build grit is simply to overcome suffering. And that can be willful suffering, something you put yourself through, an obstacle you set up for yourself, or that can be suffering as a result of something bad happening in your life, and you overcoming that and coming out of it stronger. And I think that repeated and concatenated throughout your life over and over and over again gives you a new level of grit every single time.
I agree with that, but I would also add to that you are also painfully aware of the suffering,
right,
that you experienced in the past. And part of grit is to continue to charge forward and to work hard as you are reminded of that pain, and you're like it's like a fear of falling back into bad habits, or the fear of you're reminded of that, the reminder of that suffering or that failure,
wanting to get away from it,
right? Or
state.
Stay ahead of it, or to avoid it, or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying?
Or be better prepared the next time it happens, to not be in that situation, or something.
And
like
or
that.
Right? Or I think part of it is just knowing that you always have to be prepared for that. There's going to be like salad days are not going to last forever. Yeah, like the salad days is like a Roman thing. It's like happy times, right? So it's like right now this is a good time, right? So who knows what's going to happen? Right. Neither of us have a crystal ball, but just mentally, it's a state of mind, and that you're going to, like you're gonna, no matter what comes at you, you're gonna work through it. Yeah. Right. Because you've been through all this. So from this, like I spent 4 years on a submarine. So once I got off the submarine, like everything is a vacation from this point forward. Right. So that gave me a little bit of my grit, though, it's like I could have a little bit more discipline.
Sure. And something that's interesting, this could be a whole tangent, but do you think there's a limit? Do you think there's a level of grit that is the end for how strong you can be mentally?
Like infinite grit?
Not infinite, but more so, you reach a point where...
Are we trying to mathematically graph grit now? It's like
is it like asymptotic, parabolic? What is it?
Right.
No, but more like you reach a point of mental toughness that is the human limit.
So I don't know if that applies to grit. Like every human has their physical peak,
Sure.
Whatever, it's around 28, 30 years old, or whatever it is for, wherever it resides for each individual, where you've achieved your optimal performance on a physical level. And mental acuity, or like like as a human, your brain stops evolving and learning, not learning, but like you've achieved your potential by the age of 25 or something like that.
Right.
Whatever it is, So, does that impact grit? I don't think so, because I think you can find some like elderly people that are frail that still have grit.
Oh yeah.
So.
And I think you can start building grit at any point in your life. Now, maybe it's probably extremely situational as to how easy you are or how easily you can build grit, or how difficult it will be for you. That I think is a much more difficult question to answer.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a conscious decision that you're going to say, well, I'm going to build me some grit.
Yeah.
I'm going to persist on a certain task.
I mean, just because you say it doesn't make it so. And I think being aware of the need to build grit can lead to you building grit, but that's not the action that causes you to build it. I think that can be important, but like I said, I think it really is putting yourself through hardship, in most cases very purposefully. And it doesn't even have to be for the purpose of building grit. It could be the purpose of being success, but it's, as we discussed, the greatest indicator. Therefore, it's a byproduct.
Yeah, I just think once we post this conversation about grit on LinkedIn, it can be like, these guys don't even know what grit is.
Like, look up the definition. We're completely off. Like,
we should have a dictionary right here.
Yeah, maybe. We could. We could.
So it would be awesome to get some input.
I'd love some
from our audience on what they think grit is,
a psychologist
how you develop
or
grit.
something. I love a psychologist's input, like a PhD in psychology, someone knows the in and outs of the human mind. I'd love that person's input.
Yeah, I mean, when you have three children and each one of them has a very different personality from the other, and one is showing obvious evidence of being gritty at a young age, and the other two are not, or whatever, like you have grit, but it's more like intellectual grit, right? If we put you on a football field, you'll be like, this isn't for me.
I'd be
right?
toast.
Yeah. So there's within a certain context, I think people with grit can have like massive amounts of grit, depending on if it's an intellectual context and they're an intellectual, they're going to have just, on a scale of 1 to 10, they'll be like a 9.9%, grittiness. But if you put them in a athletics context and they're not an athlete, their grit level is going to be, they're probably going to recognize that they're out of their element.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So in whatever you endeavor to do in life, if you've discovered your talents and you've viewed failure as a tremendous learning tool, and you have a lot of discipline,
yeah,
and everything aligns for you, you have a vision and you have a dream and you're working towards it, and nobody can tell you otherwise, you can have all the grit on the planet, because no one's going to ever change your mind.
Right.
And you're going to work your ass off.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
So I think there's a certain amount of that grit equation which needs to be, there's a coming together of certain things, and there's some randomness and there's some luck involved in that,
Not to go off on a tangent, but I think that's something like Neuralink has application for, like uncovering how you can build human emotions and things like that. Just because we'll be able to directly observe that process in a different way than before. So you take someone who
I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. I've read very
I mean, but that's
tangentially.
almost uncharted territory there.
Well, to be able to monitor the human brain in great detail, all of the signals and synapses,
right? Because
as it's
we can monitor the brain and the brain waves, but we've never monitored someone 24/7 for their life, right? That's never. So we've never had the, and I think that's so that the difference is so big because really
Yeah.
how you
And
build
how does grit measure on that?
Right.
How is it?
I think
How is it
it's
identified
it's
and monitored?
incremental. It's 100% incremental over a long period of time, and that's why it's so hard to identify because it's never one single thing. Usually, I mean, maybe in like a really niche scenario, but I think mostly it's never a single event in your life or action that you do that will give you this enormous amount of grit.
I think the struggle and the suffering is part of the equation.
Yeah,
For
I
sure.
mean,
That's an ingredient.
I think I'm close, but I'm no scientist or researcher yet.
Right?
If I decide to
Yes.
pursue that,
Right?
and I'd love to know more, and I'm sure this post some sort of clip based on because I think that was an important conversation, and that is my favorite question that I have on here. I mean, there's some other good stuff here.
Right?
That being said, number 9.
Okay, number 9.
This ties pretty much exactly what we were just talking about, and it's a really good follow-up question. But yeah, without accountability, failure is meaningless. Agree or disagree?
I disagree.
Yeah.
So accountability would imply that it involves more than one.
Like someone has to tell
Someone
you.
can be accountable to themselves, of course, right? But if no one's there to observe what you do, you're accountable to just yourself,
Okay.
right? So, in that controlled environment where it's just you, you're gonna have to live with the consequences of your decision making and the outcomes of your efforts and your labors and everything. And you will 100% be accountable for yourself,
Right.
whether you succeed or you fail.
Yeah.
So I just talked myself into agreeing with your
Yeah.
question, right?
Well,
Now, when you're surrounded by other people and you're responsible, your actions impact other humans, then your accountability is also a function of your impact on those other people and the consequences, good, bad, or indifferent, that you receive as feedback from those individuals,
right.
in whatever form it might be, verbally or physically or whatever.
Yeah. I think that the problem with the question, which has great principles, but meaningless is a very strong word here. Without accountability, failure is meaningless. That implies that, without accountability, there's no scenarios where failure can have value. And essentially what I'm getting at is that it goes back to the other question, which was what I was going to jump to, was that failure can be the single greatest tool for learning whilst also being the greatest obstacle for success. And the reason why those tie together is because you got to view failure
All right.
with accountability.
So if you view failure as a tool for learning, not that you're working towards failure intentionally, it's just as you're going through your process, and working towards your vision, your dream, right? Working towards success, there's going to be some hiccups along the way that you're going to learn from. And you're holding yourself accountable along the way. And as you have these failures, by viewing it as a learning moment, that is part of your accountability.
Yeah.
You're by acknowledging the failure and learning from the failure, that in itself is creating a sense of accountability.
Yeah.
Right? So if you view like you're working towards success, your goal is not to fail, and you're holding yourself accountable for, when you fail along the way, you're going to pay attention to it, and you're going to view it in a healthy way, and you're going to spend some time thinking about it and learning from it and applying those learnings towards your next attempt at that thing. That is a combination of discipline and accountability, and it helps build grit.
Yeah.
Right?
It all ties together.
It all ties together.
And
it's the stool.
Yeah. I'm trying to layer the questions. There are a couple ones out there that are like,
yeah,
did we discover math?
Now,
a couple fun ones. But,
we got to get some more. We got to get the stool kind of mapped out.
Yeah.
At some point, and then we'll share it.
Yeah, we can share it on LinkedIn. I think if we can really nail it, it'll be good. Yeah. Yeah, so the way I would tackle this question, if I were being asked, is I really like the nature of the question. I like the principles that goes along with it. Encouraging failure to be coupled with accountability so that you can maximize the benefit of inevitable failure and the learning it can provide you. These questions, they are like loaded in a way. I wrote them like that so that there's like, it's supposed to incite a response where it's like, okay, well, there's no real answer or like agree or disagree. It's like you're gonna have to think about it, and so I mean it's an alright question, but I think that accountability is almost important enough. Maybe it's important enough to be on this stool because it goes along with accomplishing everything else on this stool. We have the seat is the dream.
Or the goal.
The goal. One of these legs is discipline or grit, or one of the other legs is grit. And without accountability, which might be one of these supporters, because without accountability, how do you build? How do you get into the position where you come to the realization that you need to build grit, or you come to the realization that
you need discipline?
I failed, or you need discipline. And I think that is what I'm getting at. Is
or
that
part of it is like you've got to learn,
right,
continuously. And
it's not like we're saying something extremely profound or anything.
No,
it's the most obvious thing in the world, and it's the most difficult thing in the world to learn from your mistakes. It's the most obvious thing. You play a game of chess and you lose. It's your fault. It's always your fault. There was always a best move you could have made, but you didn't see it. And you can learn from every defeat in the game of chess and apply it to your next game. It's like life. And it's the easiest concept to understand in the world that, I made a mistake. There's reasons why I failed. If I stop making those reasons, then I'll stop failing as frequently, right? Not a radical thing, right? But to actually apply that to your life and indefinitely, and that's what grit is, and over for the rest of your life, and through death and we're at war and now I'm drafted, or I'm stuck at a job that I hate and I can't leave because I can't afford to leave. Applying all of that to those scenarios is really what life is about, I think. That's really what that's the differentiator between people who don't acquire their dreams. A lot of it is giving up.
There's circumstance as well.
Of course. I only speak in general. There are always something that will disprove the general rule.
Also admitting that as a human, you don't know what you don't know. And
absolutely.
That applies to every single one of us.
It does, yeah.
Right? Let's table the stool for now.
Sure. I'm
right?
interested.
We'll get to it though, because it's
Yeah.
like you want to simplify this and model it in a way that
It wants to be.
it's relatable, right?
And
And that can be a
digestible.
topic for another episode.
Yeah. The stool.
The
episode
stool.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to keep going? We've got
Yeah.
3 more,
Okay.
4 more.
Mhm.
Can't count. Wow. This one is a little strange. It should be. I don't know. We'll see. The meaning of life, or let's say the meaning of life is what makes life meaningful to you. What is your meaning of life?
Just this right here. You know? It's that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has.
I hope that I end up making a similar connection with your 2 younger sisters. The connection that I have with your mom.
Right.
Right. That human connection when we make each other laugh, or we enjoy each other's company. We enjoy having conversation.
Yeah.
Everything else is just to support that. Period. Simple.
Yeah. So fatherhood is a very important principle in your life.
Yeah, like this is where we're actually sharing the most meaningful thing in our lives with LinkedIn.
Yeah. And I'll
Right.
answer the question as well, just to put it out there. But so, I mean, that's very respectable, and I'm grateful for that, because this is a version of my dream. Like, I really enjoy like intellectual talks and philosophical debates, things like that. And we were talking earlier, we were talking about like Joe Rogan. It's like, I would love to go on Joe Rogan because he asks good questions. I'd love to go on Lex Friedman. He asks good questions and good topics, and it's
Right.
and the audience will interact and they'll ask good questions, and they'll. I mean, I could read comments forever. It's like, why did this person say that? And I try to reason with that. But to answer the question for myself, just so we're both sharing what gives life meaning to us, and I do think it is true. Personally, I think it's true personally that the meaning of life is what gives life meaning to you.
Yeah, I
Because
agree with that statement.
You can't say the meaning of life is happiness because someone might say the meaning of life is success.
Well, I mean, so you can ask a dozen or 100 people or 1,000,000 people the same question,
Right.
and you know, their response may it's based on what they value. What are their values? You know, so there are a lot of people that value their career over their family.
Yeah. We talked about that last episode. Some people are brilliant in business and not so good with family. You know,
Sure.
things like that.
Yeah.
Related. For me, it's inspiration. I wanna inspire. Actually, I don't know if Addison wants me to share this, but she wrote a paper. She had to write a school paper about someone she admires. She wrote about me, and she said that like I really inspired her to do better in school. And to me, that was like, that made me smile, like, on the
Yeah,
inside.
that's awesome.
That was incredible, and I want to be able to do that on a macro level, specifically for people my age. It's exactly why I asked the question that people are worried about Gen Z. I'm worried, and it's not exactly for the same reason, but, and not just for Gen Z, but
Yeah. I don't have your experience from
right.
your vantage point with your friends and
Right.
the kids that you go to school with, right?
Yeah.
So
To me, from my perspective and in my environment, and it's not true everywhere, but like I said, in my perspective, in my environment, everyone has so much more to give, in everything. At their job, most of them don't have jobs. It's okay. You do something else. They don't do anything else. Okay.
right,
School, you can do so much more in school.
right.
They're just leaving it on the
And
table.
they're hard to inspire, aren't they?
They are.
Yeah.
And that is something that makes it so appealing to me, is that if I can do this on a macro level, and it pushes me every day, I feel like I can really make a difference, and that is essentially what I want to do. And that's what gives my life meaning.
I hear you. So be careful with that. In that, you could end up spending a lifetime going full circle. So I can't remember the exact reference, but it's like an epitaph or whatever. It's like a man went out to change the world, or wanted to change the world. So he, became a father, and then he became the mayor of his town, and then became the governor of his state, and became president, and all that, whatever. And then it all comes full circle to. We have to find the epitaph or whatever. It's right. The way, yeah, we could probably Google and find it, whatever. But there's a lesson to be learned that I would classify under wisdom that you can learn from others. There's, like the net of it is don't lose sight of, like this,
right?
Meaning that connection you made with your sister, right? Right. You go out to change the world, and you end up running the risk of neglecting those that know you.
Right.
You're trying to change all those that don't know you, right? You spend a lot of time and energy and effort. And I can imagine that there could be a certain amount of addiction to the rush of, influencing, being an influencer and influencing a lot of people in a very positive way. But you could also lose sight of your family or those that are really close to you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You can balance it though. You can do both.
Do you think so?
Yeah, you just have to be accountable.
Accountability. That's what we talked about.
Right. And when you fail those, in your process of trying to change the world, when you fail those that you've made connections with along the way because you got busy, don't hesitate to apologize.
Right.
And say, I failed you, or I was wrong, or whatever the context of that apology should entail. You should apologize. Yeah. And just, I'll try to do better, right? Yeah. Even though you might go off and get busy again.
Yeah. You know, it's a good saying.
Because you're gonna get busy, and it's just like my parents are back home in Rhode Island. We do the portal once a week, and it must be heartbreaking for them to not have like direct access to come over to our house and the way things used to be. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, I mean, they were here every day, almost.
When we were living in Massachusetts, yeah, my mom was over every day. So it's like
that changed.
So yeah. So do I owe them an apology for moving the family to Florida, which was the right decision? It's like I
mean, our lives would be completely different.
Yeah, I think that we're better off now. Everything's better off now. So, but anyway, so it's probably like tough, you have tough decisions to make. There are trade-offs that you're gonna have to manage along the way, and you're gonna have to live with your decisions. Yeah. And if you're gonna go out to change the world, you can't please everybody. So
true. That is true.
Everybody has their detractors.
There's a good saying that's related to this, and you probably heard it, but it's what's more important, the journey or the destination? And the answer is the company.
Who you shared it with along the way?
Yeah.